Hi there, I am the Reverend Danny Crosby, a Unitarian minister serving congregations in Altrincham and in Urmston in the northwest of England. And I offer this devotion as a balm for the heart, for the mind, for the spirit, and for the soul. And it's titled Making Time for Active Empathy. I have a friend who's a therapist, and she's recently been creating these wonderful videos about the work that she offers. Particularly, I saw one particularly about those involved in difficult or abusive relationships, how to spot, these kind of relationships as they develop and how to recover from them. And she posted a video the other day on the 7 traits of narcissism, exploring and explaining all these different things. And one that stood out was, or one trait of a narcissist, I guess, true narcissist, I guess, is a lack of empathy. And it's a subject that's been on my mind quite a bit recently about what empathy is and what empathy means. It's one of those phrases, I think, or one of those words that is used, a bit like narcissism, I guess, which is maybe not used correctly or understood truly. And I thought I'd explore it really. I think empathy is absolutely vital to human flourishing and human relationships. Without it, often this is where a lot of the trouble starts in life, that we don't empathize truly, in the true meaning of the word, I guess. And empathy has been in the public consciousness quite a bit in recent months. There's much talk about the word. It's come under a certain amount of criticism from certain quarters that people that this is the problem in the world, that we empathize too much, I guess. I find that impossible to fathom, hard to fathom. I just don't get the idea. But anyway, there's even a phrase that I've heard said in some evangelical Christian quarters, actually. In some, by the way, I emphasize here. And the phrase being the sin of empathy. In their view of their particular version of their faith, empathy can blur what people see as right and wrong. That empathy gets in the way of that. That empathy leads people to feeling too much with others rather than correcting them for what they see as their wrongness, I guess. And that empathy can lead to manipulation of some. If they empathize too much, they are open to manipulation. This is the critique, at least. It's a view not held by most people in the Christian tradition. That's important to recognize and emphasize, at least. But it's one that has grown in prominence in recent years. It's a phrase that I've been hearing, actually. And I've heard problems or critiques of empathy from other sources too, that people can be exploited, or that empathy some see as a danger to civilization itself. I think they particularly talk about Western civilization, I guess. But I wonder if what is being critiqued and discussed is actually empathy, or they're understanding empathy in a way that perhaps I do not. So, what is empathy? Well, to empathize with another is an attempt to walk in another's shoes, to feel what they're actually feeling, to understand things from their perspective, from their life, their position. Something that is not easy, by the way. And no one should ever pretend that you can just walk in somebody else's shoes, because you can't exactly, but you can attempt to. It takes effort. It's a conscious decision. It's a conscious decision that you must make and continue to make and practice, to work at, to educate yourself, really. Now, to empathize with another, though, is to not necessarily act on that. To feel with them doesn't mean you have to act on the experience of walking with them or even in their shoes. And empathy is not the same as sympathy. It is distinct from that. Sympathy is a less intimate and more detached response, I would say. So, for example, we express sympathy for a person's situation, perhaps say, for example, following a bereavement. But just because you sympathise does not necessarily mean that you empathise, to feel with. Compassion can sometimes be confused with empathy, but compassion is a response to empathy or sympathy, actually. It's a desire to act, to ease another's suffering, to act compassionately, to do something at least. I personally believe that empathy is the key to true human flourishing, but it's one heck of a challenge. At the heart of empathy is the recognition that we are all born from the same flesh and have that same spirit running through us, this sense of oneness, that there is one people, that everything in life is interconnected. It's echoed in the words of Jesus, who said, "What you do to the least of them, you do to me." Echoed by the great mystic of the Middle Ages, Meister Eckhart, who said, "What happens to another happens to you." Recognized by the Buddha, who advised us to see yourself in others, then whom can you hurt? Empathy is an orientation of the spirit, I would say. And I believe it is the key to reaching our highest human potential and the key to true civilization. It is the lack of empathy in seeing others as somehow different, as lesser humans, if you like, that is the threat to human flourishing, to humanity. As Hannah Arendt observed when exploring evil in the middle of the 20th century, the death of human empathy is one of the earliest and most telling signs of a culture falling into barbarism. I believe at the heart of human brutality is the failure to recognize our common humanity. And at the heart of this is a lack of empathy. If we have no empathy, we cannot live with compassion and or mercy. And yet they say that empathy is the problem. I'm not sure about that. I'd like to share a short poem by the wonderful farmer poet Wendell Berry. It's a kind of short interlude here, but it is connected. It's titled, "If We Have No Compassion." If we have become a people incapable of thought, then the brute thought of mere power and mere greed will think for us. If we have become incapable of denying ourselves anything, then all that we have will be taken from us. If we have no compassion, we will suffer alone. We will suffer alone the destruction of ourselves. These are merely the laws of this world, as known to Shakespeare, as known to Milton. When we cease from human thought, a low and effective cunning stirs in the most inhuman minds. I think he's echoing some of those thoughts of Hannah Arendt. Anyway, back to empathy. And what is empathy? What do we mean by empathy? Well, etymologically speaking, the word empathy comes from an ancient Greek word, empatheia, from em meaning in and pathos meaning feeling, in feeling or feeling in. From this word came the 19th century German word Einfühling, from which we got the word empathy, to feel in. Now, while empathy has been at the heart of human civilization, the word itself is actually quite a new word. The word empathy only began being used at the beginning of the 20th century, actually. And interestingly, the word originated in the appreciation of art where it was used to describe the imaginative activity of projecting yourself into a work of art as an effort to understand why we are moved by such creativity. The word had its genesis in the work of the German doctor Wilhelm Wundt, who almost by accident actually gave birth to psychology, but also the work of the philosopher Theodor Lipps. Now, Lipps originated what was then considered a radical idea. It's about art, that the power of art actually was not so much in the work of art itself, but in the viewer actively engaging in it. That the power is in what you might call, or what was called in the mid 20th century, the creative interchange. That the power of art is meaningless until we engage with it ourselves, as we get into the art really, and then it moves up the inward aspects of ourselves. We feel it on a deep level. That's why some people are affected and some people are just left stone dead by works of art created from another hand. It's not until another engages with it and something is created from it that the art comes to life. This is creative interchange, actually. In the book, You Must Change Your Life, the story of Rainer Maria Rilke and Augustin Rodin, Rachel Corbett explained how this developed, how empathy developed, or the word itself, or this feeling in art developed into what we now today know as empathy. She wrote, "The moment a viewer recognizes a painting as beautiful, it transforms from an object into a work of art. The act of looking then becomes a creative process, and the viewer becomes the artist." This is the creative interchange thing. She continued, Lipps found a name for his theory in an 1873 dissertation by a German aesthetic student named Robert Vischer. When people project their emotions, ideas, or memories onto objects, they enact a process that Vischer called Einfühlung, literally meaning feeling into. The British psychologist Edward Titchener translated the word into English as empathy in 1909, deriving it from the Greek empatheia, or in pathos. For Vischer, Einfühlung revealed why a work of art caused an observer to unconsciously move in and with forms. He dubbed this bodily mimesis muscular empathy, a concept that resonated with Lipps, who once attended a dance recital and felt himself striving and performing with the dancers. He also linked this idea to other somatosensory imitations like yawn and laughter. And isn't it true how yawning how yawning and laughter can be infectious. When we laugh or yawn together, we are feeling with each other. We are empathizing. And empathy is to feel with another. It is to recognize ourselves in the other and the other in ourselves. Now, let's not pretend this can be very difficult and painful at times. It takes effort, consistent effort. I would say it's a moral and spiritual practice. And you know what? Empathy can be taught, and empathy can be learnt, and empathy can be developed actively. We can develop active empathy. Well, it's something in all of us, or most of us at least, I think. Now, this might surprise you to hear this, but don't worry. But I recently went to prison. It was only as a visitor to share my experience of recovery, actually, with a group of inmates who themselves were trying to find recovery. And in them, I saw myself and I saw them in myself too. I empathized with them deeply. I was humbled and moved by the whole experience. It was incredible, actually. And what I saw amongst them, the group, was deep care and concern and attention. They were attentive to one another in ways you would not expect these individuals to have been, perhaps, or my prejudice got in the way of that before I went. I was deeply moved how they supported one another in what is as challenging, one of the most challenging environments I guess we could find ourselves. I felt deeply with them. And as they felt deeply with my story, they really connected with my story on a deep level. They empathized with me, and I certainly empathized with them. So empathy is empathy something we can develop? I'm sure, I know that. Even the most lost of people can develop empathy given the right environment. Empathy is actually taught in Danish schools. Since 1993, it has been part of their national curriculum. It's named Klassens Time, during which children can seek advice from peers, learn empathy and conflict resolution, as well as strengthen their relationships and their sense of community. So the Danes see it as absolutely vital to a thriving, to their thriving communities, to their civilization. Absolutely central because they're teaching it in schools to children. Klassens Time is a step-by-step program. Students are shown cards that feature children experiencing a variety of different emotions, such as sadness, anger, and happiness. They are asked not to just identify the emotion, but to explain what that emotion means to them, to, to feel it, to take it in. They learn how to interpret others' emotions too, and how they make them feel. They're not taught to judge the emotions, just to recognize and respect the emotions, both of themselves and of their fellow students. In an essay for the Atlantic magazine, Jessica Alexander, author of the book, or co-author of the book, The Danish Way of Parenting, explains why in class and time, children of different strengths and weaknesses actually are all mixed together, they learn together. As she wrote, the goal is for the students to see that everyone has positive qualities and to support each other in their efforts to reach the next level. Further adding that the math whiz may be terrible at soccer and vice versa. So this system fosters collaboration, teamwork, and respect. It's vital to flourishing communities, or so the Danes recognise. And maybe we could all learn something from the Danish education system. It will certainly help us see that we are all one and another, or all of one and another, that we are all formed of the same flesh and have the same spirit flowing through each of us. It will allow us to thrive and be who we are, whilst also understanding that others have similar, if not identical, needs. Not to become clones, that we all become alike, but to truly be all that we can be, to create true human flourishing and a flourishing human society that we all living and share in. And empathy is at the heart of it. It's obviously they recognise how vitally important it is to their communities. Otherwise, they wouldn't have introduced it as part of the national curriculum, as important as maths and English to us, I guess. It's something that has to be worked on, developed, nurtured, for it's not easy. Empathy is not easy. It takes effort. And it can seem too much at times, especially in this our age where we're bombarded by so much and separation seems to be going on everywhere. At the time when we are bombarded by fear of the other, that people are separated, when there are voices decrying empathy and suggesting that empathy might be the problem, or at least that there is an empathy exploit, as some say, which I think this view led to what Gadside has described as civilizational suicidal empathy. But I wonder if these critics really understand what empathy actually is, or are they confusing it with something else? To feel with another, and to feel the other in us. Because that's what empathy means, to feel in. I don't share the view, by the way, that it leads to civilizational suicidal empathy. I do not share that view at all. I think the opposite, that the problem is a lack of empathy, that empathy is being downgraded, denigrated actually, when really it needs to be developed. We need to develop empathy in the truest sense of empathy, to feel with another, to understand one another better, to value each other as we are, to enable one another to thrive as individuals and as a society as a whole. There is a need for active empathy, the type that is being taught in the Danish schools, something I believe that free religious communities such as I serve, what we ought to be about actually, active empathy, developing it. Active empathy is about opening our whole beings to others. But we do this by not forcing ourselves upon them, but by allowing them to be themselves around us. This is true openness. This is inviting the other. When I say, come as you are, exactly as you are, that's what I mean. When I say, but do not expect to leave in exactly the same condition, this is what I mean, that transformation is possible, and that we can develop this through active empathy. That's the purpose of a free religious tradition experience, actually, that of transformation, not of transcending beyond life, but being moved and transformed within life to develop this aspect of our humanity. And by the way, when I talk about transformation, I'm not in any way suggesting that we are fundamentally wrong. It's not that we become somebody else or some aspect of our humanity is removed. More, it's that we become who we truly are, wholly. And in so doing, we invite others to become who they are, truly holy as well. And I believe that empathy, or active empathy, is the key to this. It's the key to human flourishing and societal flourishing too. Absolute key that we depend upon it really. But it begs the question: how do we bring this about? We can't go back to school as adults. I can't go back to school as a 53-year-old man, can I? But there are practices. There are things I can do, and I was reminded this week of the work of Karen Armstrong and her book that I read right at the beginning of my ministry. I ran a course on it actually. The book was 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. And I was thinking about that as I was driving home from prison the other day. There are many things in Karen Armstrong's work that have touched and helped me, but there's one I was reminded actually of because I've been thinking of prayer and meditation this week again, and I was reminded of a meditative practice that she suggests as a starting point for developing active empathy. And it begins by imagining Confucius's example of the concentric circles of compassion that move out from the center, that from each of us, I guess, that something we can transmit from ourselves. It begins with an in ourselves that moves out, further out to ever widening circles until it touches the whole world. The meditation suggests that we turn our attention to three individuals, three people that we know. The three being an acquaintance that we're not too closely connected to. Another, someone we hold dear to our hearts. And the third, someone to whom we bear a grudge or hold a resentment against. Armstrong suggests that we bring each one to our mind, to picture them, to name them, to bring to mind their good points, to look into their hearts and see their pain, and to desire for each of them to be free of their pain, and finally to resolve to help them in any way that we can, to wish for them whatever it is we desire for ourselves, to live by the golden rule. The purpose of the meditation is to develop upeksha, equanimity, which will allow us to relate to the people with equanimity. Now, of course, this is very difficult to practice, but if we stick at this practice over a period of time, results are sure to follow. We will develop empathy, and then we can move that out to others too. And that's a starting point, I guess. And through developing empathy, we will truly be able to practice compassion in our daily lives. We will respond. Practice makes perfect. Well, maybe not perfect, but it certainly makes things better, improves things. We have to practice every day, like opera singers have to train for years, or dancers have to train for, and ministers even for that matter. We have to practice what we do here. Doctors are not made overnight, are they? Neither are decent spin bowlers, as anybody will tell you. They take years to develop it. And all crafts take time, dedication, and consistent effort. But it's worth it though. And active empathy is no different. To develop empathy, something that is vital to our own flourishing, but also that of our communities and our shared world. Through the practice of empathy, we can live truly connected lives, and if we practice it and develop it, we will no longer feel that sense of separation and aloneness that so many people seem to suffer from. Through practice, we can grow into what Albert Schweitzer described as a spiritual relationship with the universe, and we will develop reverence for all life, including our own life. We will empathize with everything, including our own hearts, actually. Sometimes people don't. Empathy is a choice, empathy is a decision, and I believe it is vital to human flourishing. But it doesn't just happen. It's a choice we make to pay attention, to extend ourselves beyond the confines of our singular selves. Empathy is an intention. It is an intention to create something better, not only for ourselves, our current neighbours, but for those who will follow us when we are long and gone. For our lives, the lives of others, and human civilization, I believe, depends on developing empathy, on active empathy. Empathy is vital to human flourishing and societal flourishing. In fact, maybe our whole world may depend upon it. We need to develop it. Amen. I'm going to end with some final words of blessing. You know, we all need to bless more, and we can all bless. We can live lives of blessing, and we bless when we give ourselves wholeheartedly to life. So may the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, may that love be in us and among us, now and always. And may the love of God be with us all, in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, and in all that we do. Amen, and blessed be.